Hey everybody, what's up there, Taters? This is Tree from treeoflogic.com. So as promised, I am here to give you the complete breakdown of what happened in reference to the Central Park jogger, the rapist, Matias Reyes, as well as the young men who were falsely accused of raping, sodomizing her, and assaulting her, and also robbing some of the other joggers in the park. Now, I said last week that I was going to upload this video once Candace uploaded her Periscope video talking about how she's going to defend President Trump and reference to his stance against the boys. Well, I guess since she saw my video, the Hitler lovers, you know, she loves Hitler. Candace always loves Hitler. Never forget that. She saw my video and got scared. She's very afraid of me. She really fears me. And she decided to not do the Periscope video. Now, even if she does the Periscope video, that would not be in her best interest after I do my video, because she would basically have to debunk everything that I am presenting in this video. I have citations and sources that will be available in the description box. The same thing with the corrupt cop, also known as Brandon Tatum. I noticed that when he saw my video, he deleted his original video trying to say, y'all need to do your research. Y'all need to do your research. And this Negro talk about something. He got the facts and he uploaded a 38 video, making sure he pushed his merch, you know, saying, hey, white girls are expensive, let me tell you. And then he deleted it when he saw my video and heavily edited to a 14-minute video and uploaded it. Brandon, I got the original video, dude. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I got that original 38-minute video. And once I do part 1 and part 2, I'm coming for that ass. So you better lube it up, because I'm coming for you, baby. Let me tell you something. So it doesn't matter if you deleted your original video. I have it. And I'm going to use that to show just how corrupt you are. Now, with this video, this is a gift for you all. You can take this video, you can mirror it, you can dissect it, you can use it as a live stream to break it down. I have done the work for you. I have watched all of the testimonies. I have went through so much research. I mean, I can't even begin to show you my notes. And I'm going to break everything down bit by bit by timeline. And as always, you can check the description box for a list of all of my sources. Whenever I do a research video, it is never debunked. Why? Because it's well researched. It's heavily cited with sources and, you know, and basically links. And it's just based on facts. And those are not disputed, and this won't be disputed either. So if you would like to use this video to slap the right, you know, these conservatives and these Republicans, remember, I'm independent right-winger. Hence the flag. I'm a right-winger. Y'all keep forgetting I'm a right-winger. I'm a right-winger. I'm a right-winger. But I am basically, you know, punching my own side in the face. I can't stand 80% of the people on this side. They're just hypocrites. Anyway, I'm not going to go on that rant. Let me just say this. I'm going to give you the tools to shut them up. I'm going to give you the factual information to just destroy their rebuttals. Okay? So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so because I have over 50 pages of notes, I wrote a script based upon those notes. So I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to miss any specific details that shows that these boys are innocent. So I'm going to be reading from this script I wrote that is based on factual findings I did during my research. And I'm also going to give my opinion in between a couple of paragraphs. So let's go ahead and begin. All right. During the 80s, New York was a much different place than it is now, especially in 1984 when crack was introduced to the inner city, which caused crime to escalate out of control. Central Park was an area filled with a variety of people, including bums, real estate moguls, cyclists, drug dealers, crackheads, joggers, juveniles, etc. Everyone who lived in the area, regardless of race, class, and background, considered Central Park their backyard, including the mob, who were known to dump bodies in the woods and in the lake. On April the 19th, 1989, around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, several groups of black and brown teenagers began to enter the park. Even though these groups were independent of each other, they collectively consisted of anywhere between 30 to 50 males. Now, there was a sprinkle of females in the group and, tomboys, but for the most part, it was like 98% males. The reason why this group was so large was because school was out for the rest of the week due to Easter holiday. Some males within other groups began to harass, assault, and rob innocent residents within the park. Others would throw rocks at cars, while the rest just watched or tried to pick up girls. Now, I hear a lot of people who don't understand ghetto life or don't understand the hood, and they'll say, well, if you see your friends doing something that's illegal, you're supposed to tell. This is the hood. Snitches get stitches, okay? And not only that, but I can even say for my own self, who grew up in Anacostia, D.C., one of the most dangerous ghettos in D.C. during that time, I've seen a lot of crime. I've seen a lot of violence, and you're just watching it. It's not like you want to interfere. You're just observing it. And because this is a part of your environment, this is something you just get acclimated to. It's just something that's part of a life. It's just part of your life. But anyway, when Corey Wise, who was 16 years old, noticed all of this, he left and went home. This is what you all need to understand. Corey wasn't even involved in any of this. He saw this foolishness and said, I left my girl from KFC for this crap. Nah, I'm done. I'm going to go back. As he actually went home, because he was upset that he dumped a date to go see this nonsense. Now, Yusuf Salam, who's 15 years old, did the same thing several minutes later. So you had Corey and Yusuf who saw the ruckus and they left. Around 9:50 p.m., a male teacher who was out jogging was beat in the head with a lead pipe and he was robbed. 15 to 20 minutes later, the police was notified by witnesses. Some assault victims walked to the police cars to report the crime, while others were taken to the hospital. That night, 9 attacks were reported. Why did it take so long for them to contact the police? Well, you understand, this is back in the 80s, the late 80s. Cell phones were not a thing back then. Matter of fact, it was pagers, what people call beepers. And so having a cell phone was very, 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 very expensive. And it wasn't common like it is today. So if you wanted to contact the police, you had to either find one doing paperwork on the side of the road, or you had to go to a phone booth. And that was also risky, because if you went to the phone booth to try to get somebody to get off their phone that they paid a quarter to you had to put a quarter in. I don't think it was a dime. I think it was just a quarter. You put a quarter in and you had to make a phone call, and it lasts for several minutes. Wow, the days, I swear. If they got off the phone, a lot of times you're like, yo, I need to call the police. Can you get off the phone? It was like, no, I just put a quarter in here, and they'll tell you to F off. So, and then if you couldn't get a phone booth, then you had to just basically walk to the precinct if you couldn't find a police officer. When the police arrived, which was around 10:15 p.m., the chase was on as soon as they shined their flashlights on the crowd of juveniles who began to run. After falling forward in the mud, Antron McCrae, who's 15 years old at the time, went home. And basically he went home because he dirtied himself up running from the police, but he also had a curfew, so he left for that reason as well. When Raymond Santana, who was 14 at the time, and his friends noticed the police there, they left the park and they began to walk home from the park. When the police saw them, pulled over, grabbed both of them, put them in a paddy wagon, and I do believe Raymond was handcuffed to Steven. I'm not sure. I got to look at my big notes to find out. But either way, Raymond Santana was seen walking with his friends, and the police just pulled over and just basically, I guess you could call it a kidnapping, because there was no need for you to just grab them and just put them in a paddy wagon with the rest of the boys. They're just rounding them up. Kevin Richardson, who was 14 years old, ran away from the cops but was tackled by a police officer who then hit him in the face with his helmet, thus cutting him under his left eye. In the end, between 12 to 14 boys were caught and arrested at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That was the time that they actually got most of them, and then they put that time into the dispatcher. They were taken to the precinct around 11 or 10:50 or 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you need to remember this because I'm going to show these times in relations to and related to the time where the jogger was attacked and raped. The boys who were arrested also included Clarence Thomas, who was 14 years old at the time, and Stephen Lopez, who was 15 years old at the time. At 11 o'clock p.m., 5 other boys were arrested in connection to the pipe beating of the male school teacher. Some of the boys were taken to the 20th precinct, while the rest were taken to Central Park's precinct, which is on A6th Street and Transverse Road. Since this was during the time of shift change, which meaning that the evening shift was the one who arrested the boys, but they get off at 11 o'clock. And so therefore they didn't want to do overtime work. So some of them did, most of them didn't. So therefore the graveyard shift came in and they were briefed on what happened and they took over. When the evening shift took over, the Watchtower police officer basically was issuing out citations for rioting, unlawful assembly, and disorderly conduct, and some of the teens also got a citation for trespassing. And once they got their mugshot taken and the citation issued, their parents were called. Kevin Richardson and Raymond Santana was charged with unlawful assembly, trespassing, and rioting. Kevin's mother and Raymond's father were called to come pick up their sons in addition to signing their citation to appear in family court. This was normal procedure. Several hours the following morning, around 1:30 a.m., 2 males found the body of Tricia Miley, barely alive, on the eastern side of Central Park. This is very important for later. Remember, she was found on the eastern side of Central Park. The boys were arrested on the west side of Central Park. She was lying in a pool of blood, wearing only her jogging bra. Her long sleeve shirt was used to bind her wrist to her face, and here's a demonstration of how that happened. So basically, this is the type of shirt that Tricia the jogger was wearing. I have a shirt just like it. It's really good to absorb sweat, and joggers and those who work out in the winter time usually wear this. And this is the reason why it's so wrinkled, is because I had it packed with my winter clothes. So Matias Reyes took this off of her body while she was unconscious and wrapped this around her neck like this. And then he tied it around her neck. Then he took both her wrists and put them together and held them together with one hand, while he took the other hand to place this sleeve over here and then this sleeve over there, and then tied it again. And then once he tied it again, he did a double knot. And basically, she looked like this with her wrists bound together in the end, like this. It's either like, she was either like this or like this, okay? Either way, her hands were covering her eyes because Matias hated to see the eyes of the female victims that he would rape and sexually assault. But he didn't stop there. He took after binding her wrist like this, he took the shirt and placed it over her mouth so that she would be muzzled or gagged like this. So this is how she was in the end. You know what I'm saying? So that way she was gagged, and her hands covering her face and basically bound at the same time. And that was basically his MO for the women he raped. Okay, so now you see how that was done. Now, when the police and ambulance arrived, Tricia was in such a severe condition that they didn't think she was going to make it. She had lost 80% of blood. She had extensive damage done to her eyes, and there were lacerations to her forehead and scalp. Doctors said that she suffered from hypothermia. She had a fractured skull in 2 places, and she was in a coma. Since the doctors didn't expect her to live, the case was taken up by the homicide unit. The homicide unit began to investigate the crime scene. Their investigation led them to find that Tricia Miley was jogging on 102nd Street Cross Drive, heading towards West Drive. She was hit in the back of the head with a blunt object and dragged to a wooded area between the hours of 10:30 p.m. to 10:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Linda Fairstein was assigned as the lead prosecutor arrived at the crime scene. Elizabeth Ladera was assigned to be the lead district attorney who prosecuted the case on behalf of the state of New York. The supervisor for the Central Park unit told Linda Fairstein that they had arrested a group of boys for various crimes committed the night before, and that they were going to be released soon to go home with their parents. Linda Fairstein told the supervisor to hold the boys until she arrives at the precinct and to not release them to their parents. During this time, Kevin's mother and Raymond's father, along with Raymond's grandmother, arrived at the precinct to get their sons. Upon their arrival, the police lied to both of them, telling the parents that they can't see their sons yet because they are waiting on paperwork, and that's illegal. You cannot do that. During this time, the homicide detectives are now questioning the boys without a lawyer or their parents present. Illegal. You cannot do that. I mean, they did do it, but that was corruption. You're not supposed to do that. You're violating their rights. That's just wrong. This lasts all morning long, and around 6 o'clock a.m., Raymond's father had to leave to go to work, but his mother, which is Raymond's grandmother, insisted on staying. All morning, Kevin's mother begged police to let her see her son, but they refused. You can't do that. This is the reason why I thought that the story was fictitious, because we were taught to handle minors with kid gloves, and you are to never question them without their parents or a lawyer present, because they're too young to understand the law. They are too young to understand what they're saying, their testimony. Their brains have not fully developed. So that's just basically, taking candy from a baby. And so this is the reason why I was like, you can't do that, because I was trained in the police academy not to do that to minors. But crooked cops like Brandon Tatum, they don't see nothing wrong with this. So you understand that I really hope he never encountered a young person, a minor, because there's a strong chance that if he sees nothing wrong with these young men having their rights violated, I'm sure he violated a lot of also juveniles' rights, because clearly this was wrong and illegal. Late that morning, around 11 o'clock a.m., Kevin's mother fell ill and was replaced by Kevin's sister. To stall her, the police told Kevin's sister, Angela, that they are preparing paperwork for him to go home, and promised her that Kevin will be released soon. This was a lie. They were still questioning Kevin. They were harassing him, intimidating him, and forbidding any guardian, legal guardian, or any adult to be with them. Once again, I'm going to keep saying this throughout this entire video. That's illegal. You can't do that. But they did do it. But what I'm saying is, it's clear to me that these police officers were corrupt, and that's the reason why they got away with a lot of this stuff back in the late 80s. As all the remaining minors were being questioned by the detectives, names were being collected from the testimonies, and a list was created for police officers to use for the next batch of boys to be brought to the precinct. So what happened is that when the detectives would question the boys that they had caught that night, they would say, well, who was you with? And they'll say, I was with Rico. Oh, what's Rico's last name? Rico Gonzalez. Where do Rico Gonzalez lives? Oh, Rico Gonzalez live over there in Harlem, on the east side of Harlem, over at blah, blah, blah towers, and on the 5th floor, and apartment blah, 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 apartment 407. The police would write all this down and just have a list based upon the testimonies of the other guys there. Now, to be fair, you know, even if they just said, I was with my friend who ended up leaving, they still wrote their names down. And this is how they got the list of who to go see, where to go find them, and to bring them in for questioning based upon the testimonies, just innocent testimonies of saying, I was with my friend or I was talking to my friend. These were not witnesses to any criminal activity. They just wanted to just illegally question these minors just because they knew that they were ignorant to the law. Now, on that list of names they collected was Antron McCrae and Yusuf Salam. And actually, how they got Yusuf's name was they said, the tall dude, the dark-skinned dude with the high top fade, Kang, because that's what Yusuf's name was Kang, K-A-N-G. No one called him Yusuf. So they eventually, after asking questions and questions over boys, they finally got his real first name, but they basically went to the apartment complex to find out what his last name is and where he lived. So the next day, on April the 20th, around 12 noon, the police arrived at the apartment home of Antron McCrae, and they asked him and his parents to come with them to the station for questioning. The police asked Antron to bring the clothes that he was wearing the night before, and they all went to the 20th precinct. Now, this is what I'm saying, is that people didn't understand their rights. If the police show up at your house and say, you need to come with us for questioning, you don't have to go. You don't have, the only thing you can say is, listen, am I under arrest? And if they say no, and you say, am I being detained for an investigation? They can say, yes, you are. You can't leave until we get some information. And by law, you must tell them your full name and your date of birth. Anything else they ask you, you ain't got to tell them nothing. And you don't have to go anywhere with them. You don't even have to meet them at the police station. If a detective call you and say, I would like you to come in for questioning, and I know a lot of my blue family gonna get mad for me to say this, but I gotta say this, okay? If the detective say, can you come on over down the station? We need to ask you some questions. You don't have to come. You don't have to go. Okay, you won't need to learn your rights. You all need to learn what you can do and what you can't do. And also in some states, if you, if they may want, you may have to give your social security number, but it depends on the state. Here in the state of Georgia, the only thing you have to do legally, you have to legally show ID. If you don't have any ID, you legally have to give the police officer or detective your legal name and your date of birth so they can identify you. Other than that, telling them where you work, telling them who you was with and where you going is irrelevant. You don't have to ask those questions, and you definitely don't have to go with them to the station to answer any questions, nor do you have to go there if they call you to tell you to come. You just don't have to. Later that day, Yusuf Salam, who was with Corey Wise at the time, see two police officers at his door. Yusuf's name was on the list, but Corey's name was not on the list. And this is something you have to remember. Corey was never a suspect. He was never named as anyone to be picked up. But the police tricked them to come to the station. And this is the most unfortunate thing, because when they got Yusuf, they said, hey, you're not on the list, but you can come on down and keep your friend company. We'll bring you right back. They just lied. They really were evil, to take these kids, lie to them and say, come on down here for questioning. You can be with your boy Yusuf and we'll bring you right back before your parents even know that you were gone. And they knew they were not doing that. They knew that was not going to be the case. Now, I'm going to break down the interrogation process of each of the boys. Before I do that, I need to tell you some details. Now, Raymond and Kevin were interrogated for over 20 hours without it being recorded by a cassette player. Let me explain something. Back in the 80s, okay, and maybe in the 90s too. Yeah. Back in the 80s and in the 90s, you had two forms of recording a confession or a testimony. One was through a video camera, which was recorded on a VHS tape, and the other was used through a cassette recorder player, which used a cassette tape. I found it very odd that the detectives interviewed these boys for hours and hours and hours and hours, and nothing was recorded and nothing was transcribed. And the reason they did this is because they were going to play these young guys dirty. They knew they was going to be dirty. They knew they was going to violate their rights. They knew they was going to be physically and verbally abusive, and they knew that they was going to coerce them to make false confessions. If you're going to be a dirty cop, you don't want to have any type of recordings to prove that. You want to make sure there's no evidence of corruption, no evidence of you violating their rights, and definitely no evidence to show that basically you did these boys dirty. The detectives refused to allow their parents and lawyers to be present. They also denied the boys food, drinks, a bathroom break, and they also denied them sleep. So they were sleep deprived. Believe it or not, these are trained interrogation techniques that are basically given to those of us who go through certification for interrogation techniques and for interviewing. However, we were taught that you cannot do this to minors. And this is the reason why I looked at Brandon Tatum and I was like, he crooked. First of all, the low IQ Negro did not go through investigation school. He did not go through an investigation class, because I can tell by the way he's lying. I can look at him and I can see just how he's lying. I can see the way his eyes are shifting, his facial expression, that he's lying. Plus the stupid things he said. And you'll see me point this out in my reply video to him, that he knows nothing about interrogation. He knows nothing about interviewing. But when you are a corrupt cop like Brandon Tatum was, thank God he's no longer a police officer anymore, you would look at the actions by these detectives and you won't find anything wrong, because corrupt cops protect corrupt cops. Now, the detective fed information to the boys about the crime scene. Big no-no. And they also gave the names of the other boys they were questioning. They lied and said that the other boys named them as participants of the rape of Trisha Miley. Now, this is how this went. So say, for instance, you have Steven Lopez in one room, you have Raymond Santana in another room, and then you have Kevin Richardson in the third room. Okay. Now, this is how they will play each other. Somebody will go into Kevin's interrogation room and say, "Yo, Steve just confessed to me that you the one raped her." Steve never said anything like that. But I hate to tell you guys this fact, but it's true, and you can research it. And if I can remember, I will put the Supreme Court case link in the description box. Detectives and police officers are allowed to lie to you during an interrogation. It's not illegal for them to lie to you. They can lie. It doesn't matter what lies they tell. They can lie to you, and they can tell any kind of lie, and it's not illegal. If that lie caused you to entrap yourself, when you're an adult, man, I mean, you just fell for a trick. So I just want to let you guys know that if you want to learn anything from this situation when it comes to the Central Park 5, learn your rights. And I suggest you take a seminar with a lawyer, or you even look it up on the internet to see what you can and cannot say and in an interrogation or interview, and also learn the tricks that police officers play on you to get you to talk. So let's talk about the interrogation that happened with Kevin Richardson. For the first couple of hours, the interrogation started out calm with repetitive questions asked over and over again. Now, this is a very interesting interrogation technique that I've also used. So, for example, we'll use 3 questions. We'll say, where were you at? What were you doing at 9 o'clock? Who were you with? When did you see the woman? Then you just ask them again, where were you at 9 o'clock? Who were you with? When did you see the woman? Where were you at 9 o'clock? Who were you with? Where did you see the woman? If you're telling the truth, you're going to get irritated that I keep asking you these questions over and over and over again. It's going to get you a little pissed off or frustrated. If you're lying, you're not going to be frustrated. You're not going to be irritated or angry, but you will eventually slip up. This is a technique that I've seen work a lot. And, basically after, once I see someone, like when I did this doing adults are free game. I'm just sorry. Adults are free game. But when I did this, if the person is lying, they always slipped up. It is an effective interrogation, technique, and it's one that works. So that's why it's effective. So I can see how they're using it, but you don't do this on minors. You just don't do this on kids. So once they start asking all these repetitive questions over and over again, then the lies are promising him that he will go home if he cooperates. This is going to be the running theme. If you just cooperate with us, we know you can go home. You can go home, take a bath, and get something to eat, go to bed. I know you're tired. I know you're hungry. Just tell me what I need to know, and you can go home. That's a running theme. You can go home. You can go home. You can go home. You can go home. The detectives fed Kevin information about the case, and they told him the race of the woman, what she was wearing, her injuries. This is also a no-no. You're contaminating the suspect's memory. You're coercing him on what he's supposed to say. You're feeding him bit by bit information so that he can basically structure a false confession in order to incriminate himself. This is just wrong, and I do believe it's illegal as well. So the detectives would basically set them up with a scenario like this. So the detective asked Kevin, so Kevin, when did you see the lady, and basically, why did you rape her? And Kevin said, I didn't rape her. And then he'll say, well, Raymond said you raped her. Okay. Antron said you raped her. And so these are guys that Kevin don't know, but he knows of them because they basically live in the neighborhood together. They don't run in the same groups, but their groups know about the other group. So, that gives Kevin a sense like, damn, they trying to pin this on me. Well, I'm gonna pin it back on them. So when, Kevin is told that Raymond said, or Antron said that he was the one raped her, he's just gonna flip the script back on them and say, nuh-uh, even though it's a lie. This is a lie, by the way. These are just the techniques that the detectives were using. And so Kevin would say, I didn't rape her. It was Raymond. Raymond is the one that was raping her. Also, the detectives showed the boys each other's mug shots, which is, any lawyer and any other police officer who has any kind of credibility, that's not corrupt, that's actually is a good person, can see just how unjust this is. This is so kind of wrongs. I just don't know. All I could do was just shake my head like, wow, this is this is corruption beyond corruption. So when the detective was questioning Kevin, he gave the names of the other boys who was basically, he said, that was snitching on him, like Michael Briscoe, Stephen Lopez, Antron McCrae, Lamont McCall, and Raymond Santana. Kevin didn't know any of them, but due to the unlawful tactics placed upon him, he begins to name these young men as the rapists of Trisha Miley. While Detective Carlos Gonzalez and Detective Hartigan was coaching Kevin, Detective Michael Sheehan wrote out a false confession on Kevin's behalf. You can't do that as an officer. You can't do that as a detective. A detective and an officer cannot write a suspect's confession because that's a conflict of interest. When we're police officers, we are biased. I'm sorry, we just are. So to write, oh my God, to write their confession, I'm so floored that this was acceptable behavior back then. Because, like I said, we were not taught that way. Now, let's say, for instance, like Kevin couldn't read or write. It doesn't even matter how young the guy is. As long as he can write his own confession. But let's say, for instance, Kevin is illiterate and he can't read or write. Well, then that's why you bring his parents in there. And if the worst case scenario, and this is extreme case, if the parent can't do it, then that parent have to call a good friend or get someone that's not related or connected to the police department to write the confession out. Once the confession has been written out by a neutral party or a party that's close to the family, it is read back to Kevin or the person that gave the testimony or confession. If that individual says, yep, that's exactly what I said, that's the way I wanted said, that's the way you should say it, and everything that you wrote in that confession is 100% correct, then they sign it. But here you had these crooked police officers not only write their own version of what they said they confessed to, but then force these kids and their parents to sign it without reading it. But here's the thing now, it's different with Kevin because Kevin's sister was finally, after Detective Sheehan wrote out his false confession on Kevin's behalf, Kevin's sister was now finally allowed into the interrogation room after everything they did to Kevin. Okay. And then they said, well, since you're the next of kin, you have to sign his confession. Well, Angela, Kevin's sister, was smart enough to read the confession and say, wait a minute, Kevin, did you read this? Did you see what they're saying? And Kevin was like, just sign it, Angela. He was just so frantic. He was just so upset. He begged Angela to sign it so that he can go home because the police officers, the detectives promised him he'll go home. Yes, they were lying, but in order to get Angela's sister to sign that false confession written by Detective Sheehan, Kevin was hysterical. He was so stressed out. At wit's end, and he just begged his sister to sign it so that they can go home because the police had promised her, hey, we're going to get this paperwork together, sign this paperwork and you can take them home. And the same thing was told to Kevin, but that's not what happened because once she signed that paperwork, okay, they told her to go home and they put Kevin in a holding cell, so that he can go to another precinct and do a video testimony. So the following day, which was April the 21st at 4:50 a.m., 4:50 a.m. in the morning, Kevin was now allowed to give a testimony, not recorded though, by the way. This is his second interrogation, but this time his father is there. All right. But it's not recorded because they have to see if his father is going to go along with the corruption, the coercion, and the intimidation of their son and his confession. And all of this was done in front of Detective Hartigan. Now, once they realized that his father was going to put up a fight, that's when they scheduled the third and final interrogation or interview in front of the district attorney, Elizabeth Leader, and you had Detective Hartigan was sitting there right beside her. So when you watch this confession, you'll see Kevin trying to remember the story that Detective Hartigan had coached him to say, had coerced him to say, okay? Because remember, they promised that just do this, you can do this confession, you can go home, you can go home, you can go home, you can go home, you can go home. So you can see in the confession, you can see Kevin is trying to remember what the detective told him to say. So when the district attorney asked him to name everyone, he forgets and says, he forgets. And then she says, Raymond Santana. That's leading. That's leading. The district attorney I was like, she's not supposed to do that. She's not supposed to do that. So like, when, oh my God, this was so, dude, calm down. So, when she says, when you name everyone, Kevin draws a blank because he just that quickly forgot the people that he's supposed to name because he doesn't know these guys. He doesn't know them. So then she goes, Raymond Santana? And he was like, oh, yeah. Raymond. Okay. And then she asked him, did he forget anybody else? That's leading. Anybody else? Anybody else you think I remember? And then Kevin looks up and go, remember, I want you to remember when these guys are lying, they're looking up, reaching for the lie. This happens a lot with the youth. They either look up or look down shamefully or looking up, trying to be creative and grab a lie out of thin air. Okay. So Kevin does this. Kevin goes, Corey Wise. And I think the reason why he changed the name from Corey White to Wise is because the camera is not showing the district attorney, Elizabeth Leader, however the hell you pronounce her last name, dude, or the detective. They only show the kids, which I found suspect because the detective could be given a menacing look and could be intimidating, like with his arms closed and, basically making facial expressions, scaring the boys. Also, the detective, the district attorney could also be showing pictures, could be doing suggestive movements like this if she wanted them to say yes, or like this if she wanted to say no. When you are interrogating someone, everyone is shown in a video. Now, New York could be back assward. I don't know, but if you see interrogation videos, you see the detective or the police in the video along with the person that's being questioned, but not in this case. You don't see that at all. You just see the guys. You just see the boys being interrogated. So later on in the interrogation, Kevin said that Raymond held one arm down of the jogger, Trisha Miley, and that Antron held the other arm down, which is a lie. I told you all that the jogger was found with her long sleeve shirt that basically looks like this. It was so much blood coming from her head that her entire shirt was red. Okay. And it had some mud stains on it as well when she was dragged up to the trail into that wooded area where she was raped. But remember, her arms were bound to her face because of her long sleeve shirt. How could Antron have this arm pinned down and Raymond have this arm pinned down when she was like this and unconscious during the entire time she was being raped by Matias Reyes. So throughout the entire interrogation, the DA was leading questions during this process, and if a lawyer was there, he would have put it into it. And she wouldn't have done this anyway, because she know a lawyer would have put a stop to it. The entire interview, the entire interrogation was entrapment. And I need you all to understand that word alone. Yes, they were coerced, but it was also, they were being entrapped. Okay. It was an entrapment technique to make these guys give a false confession. I also have a question that I couldn't get an answer. So if there is a lawyer who's familiar with the procedures in New York, as well as the procedures in the judicial system in New York, I need you to answer this question for me, because I can't find someone to answer this question for me. So this is a sincere question. If you could answer it in the comment section, or you can send me an email, this would be great. I have never seen a district attorney interrogate, or you can call it interview, interrogate, whatever, tomato. I never seen them interrogate a suspect. I've seen them get testimony from a witness or a victim, a witness of the victim. Let me be more specific. A witness of the victim, but I never seen a district attorney, the lead district attorney, interrogate a suspect. I've never seen this. I have, as a witness for the victim, have been interviewed by the district attorney, but I have never seen that go against the suspect. And so my question is that proper? I mean, is that right? Is that legal? Is it legal? Is that customary? Did she just take advantage of the fact that these were uninformed, unknowledgeable kids, and that's why she did this? Can you all just let me know, is that normal? That's the question. Is it normal for the district attorney, in this case, the lead district attorney who's representing the state of New York, to interrogate a suspect in the case she's presiding over? Is that normal? Anyway, after giving his video confession, Kevin was officially arrested and placed in the holding cell. Now let's talk about Raymond Santana and his interrogation process. Now, unlike Raymond's father, Raymond's grandmother insists on seeing her grandson. So since she didn't speak any English, they allowed her to sit down during the interrogation. However, the coercion process was slowed down tremendously because everything had to be translated to her, and that slowed down the process. After hours of this, the detectives asked the grandmother to leave the room to talk to another detective. Now, once she left, Dr. Humberto Arroyo, I could be mispronouncing his name. I put his name and his picture up here. Humberto Arroyo played the bad cop and began to yell in Raymond's left ear. Now, while Detective Arroyo was yelling really loud in Raymond's left ear, Detective Sheehan began to blow smoke in Raymond's face at the same time. Then they would jack him up by his shirt, throw him down in his chair, kick over his chair with him in it. And they did this until he finally broke down and cried. That's when Detective John Hartigan played the good cop. Okay. So Hartigan came in there and saw what Arroyo and Sheehan was doing, and he pulls them off. He's like, "What the fuck y'all doing? What the hell y'all doing? Listen, you can't be doing that. So get the fuck out of here. You're gonna mess up the whole case." So he's acting like and by the way, the good cop, bad cop still works to this day, believe it or not. So he kicks them all out, and then he comes up and, he gives Raymond some tissue to wipe his face, and he just comes up in front of Raymond and he says, "Look, Raymond, I'm so sorry about that kid. You're a good kid. I know you didn't do these things that these kids said you did. You're a really good kid. However, you know, man, we basically, we need your help. We need your help to basically get the person who did it. And I think the guy who did it is trying to blame it on you. Listen, I just need you to cooperate so you can go home. Once again, the running theme. Just basically testify the way I want you to so you can go home, so you can go home, so you can go home. So Raymond felt so helpless and defeated, and he was so relieved that Hartigan finally stopped these corrupt cops for trying to basically kill him. He was willing to cooperate and do anything Detective Hartigan wanted him to do. So basically, Detective Hartigan grabbed a picture of grabbed a picture of Kevin's mugshot. So he had Kevin's mugshot, and he said, "You see that scratch underneath his eye? That came from the woman. That woman he raped, okay? We know he did it. Not you. You're a good kid. You didn't do anything crazy like this, but we need you to testify against Kevin." So basically, Raymond was like, well, they try to falsely incriminate me. I'm going to falsely incriminate them. And then that's when the game started with Raymond. He just basically said, no, I ain't do nothing to that lady. You know what I'm saying? It was Raymond. It was Antron. It was Yusuf. He was just throwing out any names but himself. So while Detective Hartigan was basically coaching him on what to say and what not to say, when he was more comfortable with his confession, false confession that is, and by the way, while he was giving a false confession, Detective Arroyo wrote down his Raymond's confession, his testimony. You're not supposed to do that. You just can't. Anyway. So he said, all right, man, okay, we got him, but listen, we gotta say what you did. You know what I'm saying? You gotta say what you did. We can't say that you just got scot free and you just watch. You know what I'm saying? You was at the crime scene. You know what I'm saying? You gotta say something you did. And so Raymond thought, well, what if I was to lie? What is the least thing I could have done that is not criminal? In his mind, this is the mind of a minor, hence why they always have to have their parents around. They are not capable of thinking rationally, and they are no match for a seasoned cop, a seasoned detective who's been on the force for 25 to 30 years. They got no match for them. There's no match. They can't compete with that. So anyway, so Raymond was thinking and said, well, I think the least thing I can say is I felt her breast. So that's what he was saying. He said that the other boys raped her and the only thing he did was feel her breast, which was a lie. He never touched her because he was never there. So once the detectives were satisfied with his confession, Arroyo came out to where his grandmother was in the lobby and made her sign the paper. And this also shows just how corrupt these pieces of shit detectives are, because Raymond's grandmother can't speak or write English. So how are you going to bring a written confession by a detective, by the way? You're not supposed to do this. You can't do, you're not supposed to do that. But, you bring this document written in English for a woman who only speak and write Spanish, and you force Raymond to sign it, and then you have her sign it. I mean, oh God, these guys deserve more than $41 million. And so that in itself was entrapment. That's just wrong, and it's illegal. So once Raymond's grandmother signs his confession that was written by Arroyo, they arrested him and placed him in a holding cell. They sent the grandmother home. And basically that's when they took Raymond away from that precinct and sent him to the 24th precinct for him to do a video confession for the next day. When Raymond's father came to that precinct, they told him that his son was not there, that they took him to the 24th precinct. So like his father just got off the work and he went right towards the police department, the police station. And they said, your son is not here. You got to go to the 24th precinct because he's going to give a video confession on what happened last night. And so that's his father left to go meet his son there. So now it's the next day, April the 21st at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. Raymond was now allowed to be with his father, who sat in on the video confession given to Elizabeth Lederer. Remember, the first interrogation was not recorded. I got to keep reminding you guys of that. Raymond said the other kids raped Trisha, and the only thing he did was fill up her breasts. He also stated that the other boys kept smacking her, and this, once again, this is not possible because she was bound like this. Also, she was bleeding profusely out of her head. So not only was her wrist bound together, but she had blood covering her entire upper body. What was the point of smacking her, especially with the fact that she was unconscious when Matias Reyes was raping her? She wasn't conscious at the time. She was unconscious. She was bound and gagged, and she was bloodied from here on down. So that in itself was a lie, and the detectives knew that he was lying. So once Raymond finished his video confession, in front of the detectives and the DA, he was officially arrested and he was placed in a holding cell with the other guys. Now let's talk about the interrogation of Antron McCray. I must admit, between Corey and Antron, this is where it kind of hit me emotionally, especially Antron, because he was betrayed by his father, and you'll find out what I'm talking about. One of the falsehood they depict in the movie is that Antron hugged his father and made up with his father. No. Antron hated that man to the day he died. He hated him after he died. He felt so betrayed by the man he had respected, and a man he loved and revered, and a man he was loyal to, only to have your hero, and in this case your dad. And I can totally, that's what I'm saying, this is something that can hit really home for me, because I know how that is for my mother and my father to really turn their back on me. So I totally see the pain in his face when you have your parents let you down like that. So Antron McCray. So during the initial interrogation process, which was not recorded, I got to keep reminding you guys, the detective began to ask questions to Antron. They slowly start feeding him information about the crime. They lie about the other boys, naming him as the rapist. During this process, Antron's mother and father were sitting in the room with him. Now, while this was going on, the police ran a background check on Antron's father and mother. Yes. How they did this was because they had to provide identification, and they made a Xerox copy of either their license or their New York State ID or their social security number. It doesn't matter, but they got their name and date of birth. So they ran a criminal background check, which is illegal. You can't do this. Oh my God. It was like this. Dude, I'm saying to myself, I'm so glad I grew up in DC, dude, because there's no way DC was anywhere crazy and corrupt like New York. Sure, our mayor smoked crack, but they didn't. The police department was nothing wicked like New York. Jeez Louise. Anyway, so the mother had a clean background, no criminal record whatsoever, but his father did have a criminal past. He was a convicted felon. So once the detective received a printout of Antron's father's criminal record, Detective McCabe asked Antron's father to leave the room and to have a talk with him in private. And so this is when Detective McCabe asks Antron's father the name of his current employer, and that dummy told him. At that time, Antron's father was working as a security clerk for a parking center. This is a place in New York where people pay a lot of money to park their cars, and there's surveillance cameras around to make sure they're not broken into. There's a heavy gate there, and his father worked there, and you have to actually, you can't be an ex-felon and work a job like that. And so McCabe didn't even know this. Basically, McCabe was just playing on a hunch, and he said, so does your current boss know you are an ex-felon? So first of all, Antron's father should have never, ever, ever, ever told Detective McCabe that where he worked. He didn't have to know. He could have said, I work at McDonald's. And that would have took care of that. Okay. And he said, oh, you work at McDonald's? I'm going to tell your manager. He's like, okay, tell your manager, tell my manager she already know. Okay. And it's true. McDonald's will hire ex-felons, but for the security job, that was not the case. So McCabe used that as leverage to get Antron's father to turn against his son. And this is probably one of the most heartbreaking things that happened, in my opinion, next to Corey. Corey is number one and Antron comes, second. But, the police officer, the detective McCabe said, you know what? I would hate to have to tell your boss that you are a convicted felon, but tell you what, we'll keep it a secret between you and I as long as you go tell your son to cooperate with us. Tell him to cooperate us and he will go home. Tell him to cooperate with us, he'll go home. Once again, tell him to do what we tell him to do, he'll go home. And, unfortunately, Antron's father agreed to do just that. So when Antron's father enters into the interrogation room with his son, Dr. McCabe and Dr. Sheehan ask Antron's mother to leave with them out of the interrogation room so that Antron and his father can be left alone. Now, while in the room alone with his father, Antron was told to tell the police what they want to hear. When Antron heard his father say that, Antron refused. Antron said, Dad, you taught me not to lie. So I'm not going to tell them what they want to hear. I'll be lying. You told me not to lie. You told me to tell the truth. When Antron did that, that's when his father just completely lost it. He started to yell in his face. He started to throw the chair and some other objects around in the room. And he basically demanded, he just demands, yelling in Antron's face, you're going to tell the police what they want to hear. You tell them any lie that you need to tell them to get them to leave you alone so that we can go home, so we can take you home with us. And I think Antron probably lost all respect for his father right then and there at that moment. So once things calmed down into the room, the detectives came back without Antron's mother, which is very important, okay? So it was just the detectives, Antron, and Antron's father. The mother was out there filling some BS paperwork that had nothing to do with this case. So here's the bad part of this story. The detectives, started off real calm. And then when Antron wouldn't tell them the story that they wanted, they began to yell at Antron, poke him in his chest, smush him upside his head. And they did this in front of his dad, who just sat there and just let this happen. And could you imagine being, fuck, dude. Could you imagine being a young child, especially a boy, who once worshipped your father only to see him watch white men demean you, dehumanize you, humiliate you in front of your dad? and he does nothing but sit there and let it happen. I mean, that in itself is just soul crushing. And Antron cried and he felt defeated. So finally, Antron was broken down, and the detectives, along with the approval of his father, coerced him to make a false confession. Detective Gillibrand wrote out his fake confession and told the father to sign it. And of course, his stupid, low IQ father signed the confession without reading it. And once his father did that, the detectives rewarded Antron by getting him some food. But once they did that, they said, okay, we're going to have to take you to the 24th precinct so you can rehearse this confession and say it in front of the DA. So on April the 21st, around 12:58 a.m., Antron was reunited with his mother and father again to be questioned by Elizabeth Lederer, and with Detective Gillibrand and McCabe sitting right there beside her. Now, unlike their previous interrogations before, Antron was read his Miranda rights, and this process was recorded because the other ones, remember, all of the first interrogations were never recorded. They were never transcribed. It was as if it didn't happen, and that's how it was presented to the court. But I'll talk about that in part 2. Okay. So he was read his Miranda rights, and the process was recorded. So during the testimony, Antron lied by saying that he grabbed her arm. Once again, that's impossible because the jogger, Tricia Miley, was bound by her long sleeve shirt. That was not possible for him or anyone to grab her arms. But Antron did lie, of course, by saying that Tricia was wearing a white t-shirt with blue shorts. That's not the case. Tricia was in her bra that was white, but due to all the blood, it was muddied up, and it was red, just like her long sleeve white shirt. And she was wearing black jogging pants. Or maybe even biker pants, I guess you can call them. I'm not sure the difference back then in the 80s. And she had white socks, and her shoes were white as well, or whitish or something like that. So after giving a false confession, he was arrested and placed in a holding cell with the other boys. Now we get to the interrogation of Yusuf Salam. Upon arrival to the police department, the officers took Yusuf's wallet and searched through it. That is illegal. You can't do that. Oh my God. Anyway, inside of Yusuf's wallet, they saw a bus pass that listed him as being 16. Since Yusuf was 6'3", that was really tall for that age. It was easy for him to pass for that age of 16 instead of 15. However, when Yusuf told the detectives that he was 15 years old, they didn't believe him. They also didn't call his mother. Okay. They didn't call his mother to inform her that he was there. Corey was in the next room being interrogated by Detective Nuchin and Detective John Harvey. However, Detective Harvey would go back and forth from Corey's room to Yusuf's room, harassing both of the boys. Now, Yusuf could hear the detectives physically abuse Corey in the next room. And that's when he feared for his life, because when they was hearing, when Yusuf was hearing Corey being physically thrown around in the room, and they would hear Corey yell in pain, and Corey says, okay, I'll tell you whatever you want. I guarantee you tell you want. Just stop hitting me. Yusuf feared for his life, and he really feared for his life when Detective Harvey busts into the room after basically physically dominating Corey and says, "You're next." And Yusuf was he just felt like his life was in danger. He feared for his life. Now, thankfully, Yusuf's mother found out from a neighbor that her son was at the precinct, and upon her arrival, she stopped his interrogation by telling the police that they did not have permission to talk to her son. Since he was a minor by law, they had to stop interrogating him and release him to her. And it seemed like out of all of the parents there, or all of the parents involved, Yusuf's mother was the one who was only informed of the law. She knew what the detectives could do and what they couldn't do. And that she was a hero. You know, she went there and got her son and put a stop to his abuse. Now, since Yusuf didn't give a video testimony nor signed a written confession, ready for this? Detective McKenna wrote a false confession in the DA's office and basically forged Yusuf's name on it. Let me tell you how they did this. They had Yusuf sign a Miranda card. And so Detective McKenna wrote this fictitious confession that he said he got from the testimony of Yusuf. And then they took that card with Yusuf's signature on it, and he tried to replicate it on the confession that he said he got from Yusuf, which was a bunch of lies. Also, here's another thing. Yusuf, he got the signed forgery of Yusuf's name on that confession, but his mother, they couldn't forge his mother's signature because they didn't have his mother's signature on file. So because of that false confession that was written by the detective, along with the testimony from the other boys, it was enough evidence. I don't know how that was possible, but in a way, I guess you can see it if you didn't know the corruption that was behind it. That was enough evidence for them to get a warrant for Yusuf's arrest, and Yusuf was arrested 2 days later. Now let's talk about the confession of Corey Wise. Now, please keep in mind that Corey was not on the list and that none of the other boys mentioned him until he was brought in for questioning with Yusuf. After his mugshot was taken, and I'm trying to figure out, why would they take his mugshot when he wasn't even a suspect? But like I said, these boys didn't know the law. They didn't have anybody to protect their best interests, like a knowledgeable adult. I mean, the corrupt cops, once again, supported by a corrupt cop, Brandon Tatum, and a Hitler-loving idiot, Candace Owens, they don't see nothing wrong. They don't see how these boys' rights were violated and the fact that they were young. And with Corey, it's a different level, and I'll talk about that in a way. Let me tell you why it was really different when it came to Corey. So, like, they took Corey's mugshot after he was questioned, and without a parent and lawyer present, they didn't record his interrogation. Okay, Corey has a learning disability, and these cops, the detectives, they knew that. They could tell from talking to him. As a matter of fact, I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but if you look at Corey's interviews as an adult, you can tell that he has a certain acute or minor, let me just say, a minor learning or mental disability. So also, Corey suffered from a hearing loss, so he learns how to read lips in order to cope. That was another reason why the testimony should not have been admissible, because you have someone with a learning disability, and also he suffered from an extreme case of hearing loss. Well, not extreme, but he has a case of hearing loss where he can only understand people by looking at their lips and their lip reading. Oh God, it's going to be a little hard talking about Corey, because it's just it's just sad what they did to him. But anyway, because of his learning disability and his hearing loss, this is the reason why he skipped a lot of school. He was known to skip school a lot, and he was also kept back a grade as well. Now, because of this made him the easiest target out of all of the boys. Corey's mother was not contacted until after his video confession. The same thing that was done to Raymond, Kevin, and Antron is now being done to Corey, but with more physical abuse because they knew Corey was a little slower than the other boys. He's told over and over again by Detective Hartigan that he'll go home if he confessed to the rape. And once again, Detective Hartigan is playing the good cop. Out of all of these boys, Detective Hartigan is consistent with always playing the good cop, always playing the good cop. And because they know that, because of his mental disability, they knew that out of all the boys to confess with the rape, they knew they can get Corey to confess to it. Now, what's mind-blowing about all of this is that the other boys were interrogated from 18 to 20 hours. Corey Wise was interrogated for over 26 hours, and this doesn't include the video interrogation, which lasted for 2 hours. So we're talking about a combination of 28 hours. So earlier that morning, Corey and Kevin was taken to the crime scene, and you never ever do this because you are going to falsely contaminate the crime scene with their DNA, and they can be falsely contaminate themselves with the DNA from the crime scene. So it's something you never ever do. You never bring a suspect or even a witness to the crime scene. But see, they knew that these boys didn't do it, and they needed to get their DNA on that crime scene somehow, some way. Now, here's what's so crazy about it, because I was talking about this last week, and shout out to JC. He's also a former police officer, and he reminded me that, you don't bring a suspect to the crime scene unless he is showing the police officers or deputy sheriffs where he buried the body. Okay, if he killed someone and he buried the body, then and only then you bring them to the crime scene. But even then, under those circumstances, okay, even under those circumstances, you are only, the police or the detectives or the deputy sheriffs will only allow that suspect to get no more than 10 yards of the area where they said they buried the body. It is a must that this happens so they don't contaminate the crime scene. So let's say, for instance, a guy killed his girlfriend and they've been looking for her for over 10 years. Okay. And he finally confessed to it, saying based upon DNA evidence or some new evidence that basically links him to her death, and they do a plea deal. And he said, okay, for the plea deal, we won't seek the death penalty if you basically show us where the body is buried. And so that individual will show the police officers, will show the detectives, or will show the law enforcement officers where the body is buried. And once they'll say, remind us when you get about 40 or 30 feet away from the area. And so once they get to the area, he says, okay, it's 30 feet that way. They tell the suspect to stay where he is, and they basically quarantine that area and slowly dig in the spot where the suspect said he buried the body. That is the only time you bring a suspect to the crime area. But these detectives were so corrupt that they brought Corey and Kevin to the crime scene. And then Detective, I think it was Shannon. Yeah, Detective Sheehan tell Corey, hey, Corey, your shoelaces are not supposed to be tied like that. Retie them up. Okay. Remember, Corey thinks like a 12-year-old little boy. Okay. His shoes were tied, but he did it anyway. And when he reached down and untied his shoes to retie him, Sheehan like bumps him from the back with his legs to make him fall in the mud. And Corey thankfully braces himself with his hands and prevent himself for falling face first or body first into the mud. But Sheehan is such a dirty, corrupt ass cop. Do you know this fool even tried to submit that since they couldn't get mud on Corey and they couldn't get mud on Kevin, this fool, this asshole, this piece of shit detective submitted the handprints from Corey as evidence of him being at the crime scene. And even that's when the DA said, look, we corrupt, but there's a limit to the corruption. And she rejected that evidence and it wasn't allowed. And so I was like, these people are a piece of work. So when Corey got back from the crime scene, he was interrogated more until the detectives were satisfied with his false confession. And then they told him to sign the written confession that was prepared by Detective Nugent. Once again, all of their confessions were signed by police officers and detectives. And let me tell you something. I want to bring up a point that the crooked cop Brandon Tatum said. When this was brought up in a super chat, I don't know why y'all giving that nigga money. Okay. You guys are giving money to his corruption. Okay. You're paying a corrupt cop to answer a question. Why? You know he's going to lie. And I got that video. Don't worry. I know he deleted it, but I got the original video. This fool, this lying ass corrupt cop, Brandon Tatum, the ex-cop, the crooked ex-cop. He said, see, y'all don't know how the police procedures is. See, you gotta write a report of what you saw and what they said, and you gotta submit that to the police department. I said, oh my God, this crooked ass bastard. A confession, a written confession is not the same as an incident report. This fool is trying to conflate the two. Because you guys don't know how it is to be a cop, you don't know the procedures of being a police officer. He told you that a written confession is the same as an incident report, and they're not. They're two different things. Believe it or not, an incident report is available to the public. A written confession is not available to the public until the case is closed, and then sometimes the judge will seal the files. Oh God, this is a lying ass nigga. I swear to God, he's such a lying ass crooked cop. But you're not, as a police officer, as a detective, as someone who works for that law enforcement agency, you cannot write their confession. You cannot do that. And an incident report goes towards the police department where you're giving your view of everything that occurred in that incident. But it does not include a confession. You can say the suspect or the witness filled out a confession. See article 3-A-42, and then you go on. That's how you write an incident report. But I was just amazed that he tried to say that the incident report is the same thing as a written confession. And that lying ass nigga he knew it was a big difference. But like I said, I'll show you the difference when I do a reply to his original video after I do part 2. So after all of this, Corey finally is having a video recorded interrogation in front of the district attorney and Detective Nugent on April the 21st at 12:30 p.m. And remember, this recording was 2 hours long. So now I want to talk about the inconsistency and break down the inconsistencies with the testimonies of these boys. Let's start off with Corey Wise. So Corey gave 4 different versions of the incident. When asked who raped the jogger, Corey would give 2 answers. Once again, looking up, trying to reach for an answer. He's lying, just basically reaching for the answer, reaching for the lie. So the first time he was like, when the DA asked who raped the jogger, who was the first one to rape the jogger, he looks up, he goes, Raymond. Okay, looks up, Raymond. Then 15 minutes later, she asked the question again. Corey, who was the first person to grab the jogger? And Corey, without a hitch, it was Steve. Now remember, Crooked Cop Brandon Tatum said that, watch the video. Y'all need to watch the video. He told on himself. You mean to tell me that you are that dumb that you can't see the inconsistencies in Corey's testimony? First, he says, and first of all, the fact that you can't tell that he's lying is amazing. But like I said, a crooked cop will defend crooked cops. A corrupt cop, whether he's retired or former, will support corrupt cops. That's how it works. Corey did something else within this confession that blew my mind. Corey said that he took a knife out of his sock and started cutting Trisha's legs with the knife. Guys, the only cuts or lacerations on Trisha was in her head and her forehead, her scalp and her forehead. Okay? Matias Reyes basically, in her eyes. He basically violently, tried to take her eyes out, damaged her eyes. He hit her upside the head several times with a rock, which causes a lot of deep cuts in her forehead. Also, he hit her with the blunt object with the tree branch in the back of her head. So all of her bleeding came from her head, not her legs. Her legs did not have any cuts on them. Not one. So Corey is basically making up the story to incriminate himself, and he's adding stuff to the story that's not even true. So here's another entrapment that was done by the DA. So she gives Corey a picture of the crime scene where Trisha was dragged by Matias Reyes, okay? And so the DA asked him to look at that picture and said, of this area in Central Park, and said, do you recognize this area in Central Park? And Corey takes the picture and he's studying it and he looks real close, and then he moves back and he says, no. He says, no, he never seen that area. Okay, that was a strikeout for Elizabeth. So she takes out another picture of the police cars and the police markings. There were orange cones marking where she was dragged, where there was a branch at, where her socks were located. This was after the crime scene was quarantined, and she gave him that picture to basically contaminate his memory. To give him a sign like, okay, this is the picture. You're supposed to say, oh yeah, I recognize this picture. This is where I attack him. And right on the money, he looks at the picture and says, let me get his exact words because I don't want to misquote Corey. He says, hold on a second. Okay, so he says, I might have grabbed her here. And he points to one of the orange cones, which is an orange police marker. And Elizabeth said, you talking about right there in that orange mark? He's like, yeah, I might have grabbed her right there. One, this was not the area she was grabbed and dragged. Two, Corey's lying on himself because, like I said, they took advantage of his mental disability, and basically they found that he was the easiest one to incriminate himself. So if you really look at it, okay, Corey was piecing together the puzzles that were given to him by the district attorney. Okay, so he was taking signals from her, because she was basically feeding him information, leading him with questions. You know, it was clearly, if any lawyer saw this, they saw that these boys' rights were really, really violated, and this is a clear form of entrapment. Now, when the DA asked Corey how the victim was struck, this is, if you ever want to know a clear case of leading the witness or leading the suspect in questioning, this is like a clear, even if you have no background in interrogation and interviewing, this right here is a clear case of it. Now listen to me, because this is available in the description box right where Corey is is confessing. So the district attorney asked Corey how the victim was struck, and Corey said she was struck with fists. And he goes, with fists? He's like, yeah, you know, they were punching her. We know that wasn't true. And then the district attorney asked, you didn't see anyone use any kind of weapon? Contamination, leading the question. And then Corey said, no. And then she asked him, did you, this is the blowing my mind part. This is where she plants the seed into Corey's mind. Okay. Listen to this. She says, you didn't see Kevin use a stone or brick? Let me repeat that again. You didn't see Kevin use a stone or brick? Planting that seed into Corey's head. Now, Corey naturally says, no, I didn't see that. But guess what? 20 minutes later, within the interrogation, okay, she asked again, but this time she frames it differently. She's a piece of shit. She is such a piece of shit. She says she asked him again about the weapon, but framed it in a leading question, and she did it this way. First of all, she started to lead him up with it, and then she asked the question. She says, how did she, the jogger, get the injuries she had when you first saw her? You know, when you're in a fight, you know, when you punch someone, you get bruises. You've seen fights before. You know, you get a bruise from a punch, but you don't get bleeding. You don't get these lines. And this is the reason why I'm like, how come they not showing a picture of her? Because when she says get these lines, I believe that she was showing a picture, because she actually did show pictures of Trisha laying in the bed in a coma, okay, on life support. So she shows a picture to Corey, says, you know, you get a bruise when somebody punches you in your face. You don't get these lines here. You know, you don't have all that bleeding. You don't get a fractured skull. Okay. So let me repeat her word for word. Here she says, you know, how did she get all these, injuries? She had when you first saw her. You know, when you get punched, you get a bruise. You seen fights. When people get they get punched and there's nothing but a bruise. You don't get all this bleeding. You don't get these lines. And so she shows the forehead in the picture of Trisha's. She shows the picture of Trisha's forehead when she's on life support. Then the DA says, you don't get a fractured skull from a punch. Again, she said, you don't get a fractured skull from the punch. And remember, she earlier planted a seed in Corey's head and said, you didn't see him pick up a rock or a brick. Finally, Corey catches on, okay? And he says, and I quote, maybe they hit her with a rock or brick. And then he said, Kevin was the one who probably hit her in the face with a rock. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about the inconsistencies of Corey's testimony because I'm almost finished, but I'm going to just stop right there. And then I'm going to just talk about the other conflicting testimonies or conflicting confessions from the other boys in reference to what she was wearing and who attacked her. So let's start with Antron. Antron said that the jogger had blue shorts and a white t-shirt. Kevin, on the other hand, said that the jogger had gray shorts over black biker pants with a white tank top. That was not true. And Raymond said that she was wearing all dark clothes. That also wasn't true. Now, when it came to who attacked her first, Kevin said that Antron was the first to grab her and knock her down, and said that the other boys raped her, and except for him. Raymond said that Kevin was the one that grabbed Trisha and knocked her down, while the other males jumped on top of her and had sex with her. All he did was grab her breast. Then he changed his testimony later on in the video and said that only Kevin had sex with her, not the other guys. And then I think the most strongest testimony from all of the guys was from Steven Lopez. I have his testimony in the description box below. Okay. Steven was flat out. He stuck to his guns. He said, I ain't had nothing to do with it. They tried to play good cop, bad cop. He wouldn't fall for it. They tried to coerce him. He was like, look, I'm telling you, I wasn't there. I don't know about no woman. I mean, he stood firm on his testimony, but he did testify to assaulting one of the joggers, and that's another, well, I'll talk about that in part 2. Okay. So here's a summary of everything that happened with the interrogation. So I'm almost done. Here we go. These are the key points I want you to keep in mind. None of them described the location of the crime scene, including Kevin and Corey, who was taken to the crime area. Okay. They was taken to the crime scene. And even after being taken to the crime scene, they couldn't testify that that's where the rape occurred during their recorded testimony. Amazing. No recording of the district attorney asking questions or the detectives sitting there intimidating the kids. They only showed video, or they pointed the video camera only at the kid. Normally, or shall I say today, or even when I was a police officer, everybody was included in the in the recorded confession. It was me, it was another police officer or detective, and the person we're interviewing. All of us were involved, and all of us were seen in the recording. And it's amazing that they only pointed the camera at the boys. Total corruption. So the district attorney, Elizabeth Ladera, admitted on video that the boys had previous sessions with the police officer. So if you get some of these inbred racist ass crackers and their low IQ Negro slaves talking about it was their first testimony. In the recorded testimony, the DA admit that they had an unrecorded testimony with the detectives, and that's where they were coerced, entrapped, abused, tortured. And it is torture. They was tortured during that interrogation process in order to get their fictitious confession. The police coerced them during the first unrecorded interrogation, fed them information, intimidated them, physically and verbally assaulted the boys, gave them no food, no drink, and they were deprived of sleep. The police led the boys by saying they would be witnesses, but they lied to them, saying that they are witnesses, when in reality they were interviewing them as suspect. They lied to them, but believe it or not, this is not illegal. The boys did not know their rights, and they were clueless about the Miranda warning. And if you all want to know what you can do for your kids, teach them about their rights. Teach them about how to deal first of all, stop this resisting arrest. Stop this running around, running away from the police. That gets you nowhere. Just tell them that they have to, by law, give their legal name and date of birth, sometimes social security number, depending on what state you are in, and that's it. And demand to talk to your parents. Demand that they call your parents. Refuse to answer questions until your parents or lawyer or guardian arrives. Okay? All right. So then the parents and lawyers were denied to be with them during the first interrogation, except for Yusuf's mother, who knew the law and demanded the release of her son. Next, detectives told them all that they would that if they lied, if they cooperated, if they told the DA and told them what they needed to hear, they will all go home. That was not the case. That was basically entrapment and coercion. It was just straight up lying. There was no recordings or transcripts of the first interrogation available. They refused to have themselves recorded or any transcript because they were basically violating these boys' rights. Now I want to show you a map of Central Park, because this part is going to be mind-blowing. Okay. Now, the boys were arrested by the reservoir on 96th Street at 10:30 p.m. Let me repeat that again. The boys were arrested on 96th Street in Central Park at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Trisha was raped by 102nd Street Cross Drive near West Drive between 10:30 and 10:55 p.m. Let me show you what that looks like. Here we have it. Okay. All right. Right here, this is 96th Street, because this is 97th Street. Okay. Right here on 96th Street is where they were arrested. This is on the west side of Central Park. Right here is Transverse. Okay. Right here is 102nd Street Transverse. What is this? Transverse? They have some crazy names in New York. I'm not, okay. Sorry. 102nd Street Cross Drive. 102nd Street Cross Drive. So this is 102nd Street Cross Drive. So this is her going to West Drive. So she was dragged right here. This is 400 feet from here. It takes them 20 minutes to get from here to here. So it was impossible. It was impossible for the boys to be arrested here while she was being raped here. You see what I'm saying? This is what the detective said. She was raped between 10:30 and 10:55. Well, guess what? The boys were running away from the cops over here. How the hell could they be over here running away from the cops and getting arrested and then being over here raping Trisha? Unfreaking believable. This is amazing. And also, so right then and there, that just shows they were just basically lying. These were some corrupt cops. And last but not least, none of the boys mentioned Matias Reyes, who was found to be the only rapist. This is the person who raped, his DNA was found on her and inside her. Okay. And at the crime scene, the way she was bound up and attacked was his MO, but yet still none of the boys mentioned Matias Reyes. Why? Because they didn't do it. They didn't do it. They didn't do it. They were lying because they were forced to lie by these dirty detectives. All forms of DNA was taken from all the boys questioned, such as their fingerprints, their handprints, saliva, hair, shoe prints, blood, semen, and their clothes. And this is important for you to know for part 2. Okay. Now, it was more than just 5 guys that were arrested and charged with this case. The complete list was actually 9. Initially, it was the Central Park 9. Okay, which they labeled as the Wolf Pack. Trying to equate them to animals. Their names are Michael Briscoe, Stephen Lopez, Lamont McCall, Clarence Thomas, Antron McCary, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, Yusuf Salam, and Corey Wise. They all were booked, and they all were charged with 13 felony counts and taken to jail to await arraignment that was scheduled that weekend. Now, Antron, Kevin, Yusuf, Clarence, and Stephen, they all made bail. Raymond and Corey stayed in jail because their family couldn't afford to get them out. So Raymond was sent to Spofford Juvenile Detention Center in the Bronx, and Corey, unfortunately, was sent to an adult prison on Rikers Island. And last but not least, this is coming to the conclusion. I want to talk about the media coverage. The media went crazy with this story from the day the boys were held for questioning. The newspapers, TV stations, talk shows, and magazines all painted these boys as animals and convicted them before they even made arraignment. They exposed their faces, published their names, addresses, and phone numbers in articles. This was immoral. Normal practices by the mainstream media is to pixelate the faces of minors and to definitely hide their names, especially if they're charged with a crime, regardless of how heinous. They were all presumed to be innocent until after their court hearing to see if they were found innocent or guilty. But that was not the case for all the publications in New York. And the worst publications to smear the boys as animals were the New York Daily News, the New York Post, Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. Together, these publications ran over 400 articles in 2 weeks. Now, let me be specific about this. Not these four. All of the news and magazine publications within the state of New York together ran over 400. Oh my God, that's so 400 articles within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks. These young men didn't have a chance. They all published the boys' names and mugshots in the articles. However, they kept the name and picture of the jogger, Trisha Miley, a guarded secret until two black publications like the Amsterdam News and the City Central published Trisha's full name. And when the other white publication said, "Hey man, what's up? Why are y'all doing that?" The black publication said, "Hey, if you did not honor the identification of minors, then she's open game too. So we're not going to honor her name, and her name shouldn't be a secret if you're not going to allow these boys' names to be a secret." So it was tit for tat. The papers would say that the criminal activities that the group of black and brown men created in the park was called wilding. Lies. This was straight up lie, which is a term they got from the police to describe animalistic behavior. So when they thought about wild animals, they were like, these were wilding. And they said that they got it from teenagers, which is okay, first of all, this was a lie because the police officers misunderstood the slang they heard from other boys talking about crackheads. He's like, "Yo, man, he over there wilding out over crack." And they thought that he said wilding, not wilding out. And that is not what the kids refer to when they went to the park, because the publication said that when the kids went to the Central Park, they all said, "Hey y'all, let's go to the Central Park and wilding." That don't make any sense. I can sit there and say, "Yo man, let's go to the park and hang out." Sure. But let's go to the park and wilding? They wouldn't even say, let's go to the park and wild. Let's go wilding out at the park. They wouldn't even talk like that. Okay. And I think one of the most popular words during that time was bugging. You know what I'm saying? You bugging out. But these stupid police officers. Anyway, when Yusuf and Corey were picked up, the police said that they were in the back car singing Tone Loc song Wild Thing. And I said to myself, oh my God, these lying ass crackers. Oh my. First of all, let me just say this as a former police officer. I have had lots of people in the back of my patrol car. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that not one of them was in the mood to sing a song. As a matter of fact, I am confident to speak on behalf of 98% of the police officers in America today, current, active, or former or retired, that 98% of us have never, ever had a juvenile or an adult in the back of our patrol car in the mood to sing. They said, these racist ass, cracker ass cops said, was like, oh yeah, Yusuf and Corey was in the back talking about something. She want to do the wild thing, and they were bragging about raping her. No, they didn't. Let me tell you something about the youth. And I do know this for a fact. When they're in the back of your police car, your patrol car, they're trying to think of, oh my God, my mom is going to kick my ass, or, oh my God, I hope they don't tell my father. What lie am I going to tell? What truth am I going to tell? What did they know? What did they don't know? They are in their heads. I don't care if I do turn on their favorite song. The last thing they want to do in the back of my patrol car is sing. So I knew they was freaking lying. So anyway, the newspapers painted these boys as animals by referring to them as the wolf pack. Some reporters even overtly went racist with it, like journalist Pat Buchanan, who said that since Corey is the oldest, he should hang from the highest tree in Central Park. Pat Buchanan wanted to bring back lynching as a spectacle, like back in the Jim Crow days, and lynch Corey before Corey even had his trial. And because Corey was the oldest, they wanted to lynch Corey in Central Park. How the hell do y'all not think this shit is not racist? The story was so sensationalized that even the inmates vowed to make prison a living hell for the boys. Thanks to the media, the boys were convicted by public opinion before their criminal court case even started. Now let's talk about Trump's ass. I want to say for the record, this wasn't the reason why I got off the Trump train. Real quick, I got off the Trump train back in February the 15th when that lying piece of shit signed the omnibus bill and cucked on the funding for the wall. Not to mention before then he was skating on thin ice with me when he signed the bump stock ban. And now I hear that he wants to sign another gun control bill into law banning suppressors. He's jeopardizing my Second Amendment more than Obama. Not to mention the prison reform bill, which I was always against. Like, wait a minute, you keep talking about you're going to help the black community, but yet and still you sign a prison reform and not education reform. I mean, identity politics. I can go on and on and on and on. But that's the reason why I got off the Trump train. He was already skating on thin ice with me, and then on February the 15th, that sealed the deal. I was done with Trump. I refused to vote for him. Okay, I don't want to support him. I don't want to deal with Trump. But this situation with the Central Park 5, this makes me hate Trump. Because here you have a man who was falsely accused by Stormy Daniels. He is falsely accused about the Russia, saying that everything was a witch hunt. But you don't believe the Central Park Five was victim of a witch hunt? You lying piece of shit. Really, Trump? This wasn't a witch hunt? You don't even have the humility to say, I was wrong. No, you want to triple down and say that these guys deserve the death penalty. You wanted to kill young boys before the court even found them guilty. And when their charges was vacated, when they were exonerated, you still said, don't matter, they poor, they're black. I know I done triggered out a lot of mega people. Oh, fuck you guys. Fuck you. Fuck everything about you. I don't give a shit about you. So anyway, let's talk about Trump, bitch ass. So Trump invested $85,000 of ads, which included 4 full pages of ads in various magazines, thus inflaming the public's perception of the boys by calling the return of the death penalty. Now, this was done within the first week of their arrest, and Trump didn't even allow due process to even see if these boys were convicted, was guilty. He just saw, black and brown guys was arrested. This lily white girl was abused. But by the way, 2 days before Trisha was raped, a black woman was raped. I didn't see Trump give a shit about that. But I'll talk about that in part 2. Okay, so no trial was set, and basically he did this for 3 reasons, and I'm gonna tell you why, and then we're gonna end it. I'm gonna end the video. He did it for, 1, to be in the spotlight, free publicity. Trump loves free publicity. He loves to be in the spotlight. And basically, he was still riding off the fame from his first book, Trump, The Art of the Deal. The second reason he did this was to virtue signal to his elite power base. It's all about classism with this asshole. And the third, Trisha Miley was good friends with John Merriweather from the Solomon Investment Banking. And John Merriweather is good friends with Trump. So when this happened to his friend, because Trisha don't know Trump, but she's real close with John, John knows Trump. And so John basically called Trump and asked for a favor. And then Trump did it, but he was able to, kill 2 birds with 1 stone by taking the spotlight, virtue signaling, but also cashing in a favor for a friend. And this was pure racism and classism. But this was also, in my opinion, you guys can probably differ with me, this was more about class than it was about race. Yes, it dealt with racism. It did. I'm not going to lie. And I don't use that word often. I don't abuse that word. This was racism, but it was more about class, because it was all about the rich and powerful versus the meek and poor. And this is the reason why he loves people like Candace Owens. Candace Owens came from privilege. She has that snootiness about her. And this is why these racist ass crackers like, okay, this is the nigga who's going to save the other niggas. She's going to be the Harriet Tubman for the black community. And basically that's it. I don't want this video is very long. I'm proud of myself. I didn't do that much rants, but I'm going to just say this and then I'm going to end it. In part 2, I'm going to talk about the DNA results, and I'm going to talk about the word inclusive, because I notice everybody likes to talk about that word. So I'm going to talk about that in part 2. I'm going to talk about the court case, what happened before, what happened during, what happened after, the aftermath of the jail sentences, when they got out of jail. I'm going to talk in detail about Matias Reyes and his victims, the confession, the charges being vacated, the federal lawsuit. I'm going to talk about all of that in part 2. But before I go, I want to say this. I did my research. In the description box is a long list of citations and sources. I ask you to share this video. If you want to take it and upload it to your channel, you have my permission. I won't copyright strike you for that. If you would like to learn everything that I've taught you in this and make your own version, I welcome you to. I did the work for you all. Now it's up to you to spread the information. Go on Twitter, go on Facebook, go on Instagram, and challenge these people who are still saying that these young men are guilty. I'm giving you the keys to unlock a nice big case of verbal ass whooping up on the Republicans and the conservatives. Okay, I'm giving it to you. Do something with it, guys. Remind everybody that Candace, Miss Hitler lover, she loves Hitler. Remind her that she supports corruption, hence why she's in the position she's in, and that Brandon Tatum is a crooked ex-cop, and thank God he is no longer on the streets. Share the information, share the wealth of knowledge, share this video, and I'll see you guys on part 2. Okay? Later, taters.